Idaho is the greatest state in the country. Prove me wrong. Hey, welcome to North Idaho Experience. In today's episode, Eric and I sit down with Cal Habayeb. He is a local guru on North Idaho politics and Idaho politics in general. We're going to talk about quite a few topics today, including obviously Idaho politics, why North Idaho is the greatest place on earth, and how Idaho is winning the race to attract qualified citizens from many other states. This was a great, enlightening conversation. We had a great time, so enjoy. And remember, if you guys are thinking about making the move to North Idaho, our real estate team specializes in helping conservative families find their freedom right here in North Idaho.
So I'm a big fan. I think that's in Idaho statute, they designate a resort town as being less than 10,000 in population. But that was, God, I pulled it up the first time we did it. I want to say it was like 82 or 83.
That's when we surpassed 10,000?
No, 82 or 83 is when they came out with the statute. That's when that became a thing. So,
and probably in the 1990s is when they surpassed 10,000.
Yeah. And like I said, some cities recognized it early. Like Sandpoint was pretty smart, and they incorporated such a small area that they were able to stay under that. So they could tax however the hell they want.
Right.
But I still think, if you're talking about a statute that was in the early 80s, don't hold me to that. I don't remember, but it was something like that. I mean, a lot's changed in 45 years.
This topic's been coming up a lot, and I've talked to a few people outside of here that had not even heard of that.
Yeah,
and I'm like, man, it's such a good way to increase our tax revenue and not put that burden on the citizens that live here.
Yeah, but why does Boise or the Idaho Well, I guess I could see, where they would want to have some regulation or control over that, but shouldn't it be up to the cities? I mean, the cities know best how to manage their own population. If it started impacting their tourism to the point that they needed to back it off, then you just back it off. That's free market capitalism.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a balance, right, of subsidiarity is what it's called. It's like how much power is separated between the state and the city. I personally like more subsidiarity. Right now we're in a good place because our legislature is pretty conservative, right? So you can, and a lot of their legislation is designed to punish Boise. But then there's, like you said, like there's this like effect on smaller cities where it's like, okay, if you're designing legislation to basically get Boise in check, then you need to have a mind for some of these other mid-sized cities that your policy doesn't have a negative impact on them, or you're not taking away some of the autonomy of cities to make their own local decisions. So there's a lot of different elements and fights going on that spectrum.
And I see it at a very micro level, right? I'm just focused on Coeur d'Alene centric. I could see how that would become, a tool that you could use with other cities, but up here, again, I look at it and say nobody knows Coeur d'Alene like Coeur d'Alene, right? Mm-hmm. If you imposed a 3 to 4% or 5% gratuity on a hotel room, how much is that going to impact our bottom line on the number of tourists that we get here, right? Is that going to hurt businesses downtown?
Personally, I don't think so. No.
Right?
No.
I think a lot of the citizens here would be all right on a few days if there were a few less people. But yeah, that one's a tough one. But I do like hearing people like Doc, who we just had on, where he's talking about being a little bit more creative with revenue generation as opposed to just burdening our existing population with more taxes.
He had some good ideas. They were wild ideas and definitely outside of the box. And I know, I don't know, but I feel like maybe there'd be some pushback from North Idaho because it's, his ideas were more technology based.
Right. That's his background.
Yes. Right. So I think it's smart to play off of the talents of the people that we have living here, and that's okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, an example of that is I wasn't there, but I heard about it. There was a hearing, the Board of County Commissioners on Wednesday, where there was a big push to prevent data centers from being built here.
We had talked about that at coffee.
Yeah.
Or maybe I talked about it with Doc.
He talked about it on the podcast.
Okay, that was it then. Yeah. And I saw that literally the next day, and I was like, dang. Okay. Well, I mean, where do you stand on this? Educate us.
I don't. Doc knows more than I do about like data centers and like the risk of creating like a 15-minute smart city. Like that's like the big concern from a big segment of the population that's maybe not very representative, but they're small and mighty and they're very loud. For better or for worse, is they may not know like the intricacies of where the risk lies of having a data center, right? Like it might just be in their mind like a seed that's planted so that a Facebook or a Microsoft can like kind of put their surveillance mechanisms in place locally, right? That's what probably a lot of these people think, is that if you have a data center here, then that's just going to be the control center for surveillance for everybody, right? But technology is technology. There's, you have servers that have purposes that, and they can be managed in a way where there's safeguards. I think that if we want to draw kind of middle upper class jobs here, and really, and even for self-sustainability for our own, like if you're a decentralizationist, if you want more sovereignty for your area, you're going to want to have some kind of ability to have a technological infrastructure where you can manage that from, right? So I think that I don't have a position either way. I mean, this place is a great place for a data center insofar as energy cost is low. So that's what really data centers run on. But I think it's
what's the fear of people in 15-minute cities? Is the fear that there's going to be a camera on every street corner monitoring everything that you do? Is that the ultimate fear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that you're tracked, that there's cameras everywhere, that once you kind of get used to this small environment that you can operate in, then it's almost going to be like a de facto concentrated area that you're not going to be able to leave, right?
I don't see how a data center is going to increase that risk. I mean, do people realize that we're tracked every moment with our watches and our phones, right? I mean, it's like we're already there. Not that I want a camera on every street corner either, and I don't want that, but I often wonder if that argument is like legitimate against.
Man, where I always went with this is at the ultimate end game, if somebody's following you and tracking all of your movements, you always think about the guys jumping out of a van all in black and bagging you, right? Who does that? I mean, what entity does that? The majority of the time that you're going to like intercede with a local population, you have to enlist the assistance of local law enforcement. And I can just tell you that's flat out not going to happen here, right? We had that where we had some rounds during where they were trying to impose certain restrictions, and there were officers that just flat out wouldn't do it. I mean,
and again, I want to be devil's advocate on both sides. I mean, look at what happened with the truckers in Canada, right? Like the police didn't arrest them, and maybe some of them they did, but what they did was they turned off their bank accounts, right?
Right.
So
that's valid.
I mean, it's like a slow burn. I mean, I'm trying to embody why there's such a big pushback. It's about conditioning, right?
Yeah.
Like if you condition the population, okay, so you're not going to move that much out of your way. Maybe you don't need a car anymore. Okay, then you have less personal autonomy. Maybe you're plugged into the grid a little bit more, through digital IDs or whatever. And we saw what happened in the UK, where in order to work in the UK, their prime minister just said you have to have a digital ID, right? So, that ostensibly, he's serving some of the population that's like, we don't want illegals or immigrants in here, so we're going to force them to be on the grid so that we can track their criminal activity, right? But then the whole population has that, so it's about a slow burn. I don't think a data center is really a main contributor to that. I don't think we're even anywhere close from a North Idaho perspective where that's actually a concern. There's other places that it probably is more of a concern, but I think that's just where the anxiety is, and I think a lot of people are scarred from the experience from where like it was so rapid, the passport, like, the distrust of the government was so validated because, they said, oh, well, it's just, 2 weeks to stop the spread. Oh, we're not going to have passports. Everybody was talking about that. Oh, those are just conspiracy theories. And then there was, a need to have a passport or a vaccine card to even go to restaurants, right? Where I came from in San Francisco, you needed to have a card to even go into restaurants or bars, right? So
crazy.
That was a very rapid acceleration. So it's a balance. I think a lot of it's about education. Like, what is a data center? Like, what does it actually do? Is it, where is the data? Where are the APIs, like the inlets, like who gets access to the information? Is it really like an example of companies building their own, like basically racks inside the data center that they have personal control over from a company perspective? I don't think it's as big of a risk as people are making it to be, but there is valid concerns that it could turn into something later. But I don't think it's a big deal for us here.
I get, I think people want to hold on to the traditional way of life here as much as possible, and I agree with that. But at the same time, the world is rapidly evolving,
Right.
and if we don't evolve with it, where does that leave us? It's like the kids, and I struggled with this with my kids forever. Like, do I let them have iPads and technology?
Right.
There's a balance there. I don't want them on it all the time, but if they don't know how to use technology in the world they're coming into, they're going to be at a disadvantage.
Right. Yeah, no, I had that thought this morning. I had a conversation with my wife. My daughter goes to a school where they ban technology. It only goes through 8th grade, but they're not allowed to have any technology. There's no iPads. Our neighbor just got like a smartwatch for their 12-year-old daughter, and all it does is just allows the parent to like track where they're at, and then there's like an emergency thing, but no phones. Like the idea is there's no phones, no access to technology. And I had the same exact thought. It's like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. We want people to like be able to read books and learn without having to, have the almost the ADD like digital, interface with the world. But are we gonna like prepare our population to be, unable to compete for jobs or anything like that? Like that's where it's going, or like not have any concept of the interaction with like increasingly advanced technology, AI, or all that kind of stuff. Like, are we going to basically grooming our population to be more like Amish? A different degree of that. But yeah, I mean, it's a balance. Like you want, if you want to get into leadership in our state or our country, you're going to have to be aware of these technologies and have some exposure to it.
Yeah. I had one more thought on the data center, and I'm not advocating for it. I don't know either. I really don't have a stance on it. I'd like more information, but Bill Kirk brought this up when we were podcasting with him, that these large tech companies, the employees that they tend to attract are more left-leaning. That would be the bigger risk, in my opinion, for North Idaho, is that, these companies start to move in here because it's favorable for business, and now they're bringing these employees by the thousands here. That's going to change our culture. Is that a legitimate risk? You're in the tech business.
Yeah,
right?
I think it is. I mean, you look at Austin, you have Meta, you have IBM. They built a lot of their infrastructure around Austin. I mean, Austin was always a cusp city, let's call it. But
it was always hipster. It reminds me of like Portland and Seattle, 20 years ago.
And same with Boise. You have Micron Technologies there. They were one of the biggest proponents of the vax mandate and measures. The people that come in to those companies, they typically go to really good universities where we know what the prevalent ideology is in these universities. That a lot of them are people that come from out of the country that maybe don't have the same values that we do in terms of self-sustainability and autonomy and questioning of the government and the balance of a small government mentality. So yeah, that is a real risk, right? So if you do want to transform North Idaho and Coeur d'Alene specifically away from an economy that focuses squarely on tourism, which I would say is more of a have-not society. It's like you have the people that own all of the tourism infrastructure, and then you have a lot of service workers, right? And then you hear all this stuff about, well, we need workforce housing, we need low-cost housing so that the service workers can basically serve the people that come and visit here. The only way to really offset that is to kind of invest in middle upper class jobs and industries where you can have higher paying jobs, which would then allow you to pay for the higher housing cost. There's going to be that risk that you said that, like, okay, well, a lot of the people that go to university that can do those jobs or worked in a big city and want to move to a place like this, they might bring a little bit more liberal ideology. But there's a lot of people, like when I live in the tech world, I worked at Salesforce, I work at Cloudflare right now. It's not as, I would say uniform of a political ideology in these places. So people are going to self-select where they want to live. And I think that if people know that a place like this is conservative and it comes along with that type of lifestyle, it's very faith-based society, then it's not like all one or the other. So it's something that has to be taken into consideration.
I agree with you. And I think, and I definitely hear what Bill had to say. And I think he's right. I think there tends to be, there is a tendency to believe in that ideology if you get into the tech world. And I do think a lot of it is because it requires a 4-year education at a 4-year institution. You know how I feel about the institution of higher learning right now in that entire industry. I do think that North Idaho's culture here and the way people live life here may be stronger than that tendency, because there are going to be certain people that won't even entertain the idea of taking a job here, even if it was a tech job at a data center, purely because it's in North Idaho. I mean, I have family members. It's been an outright war, it seems like, the last 2 weeks, where they just are hating on North Idaho because they don't have any facts to back up any of their any of their tantrums.
Right.
But they like to blame the ideology that's attached to North Idaho. So I do think there'd be some that just wouldn't come here at all.
Yeah.
And I think the answer with the data center is conversations with people that have been there for some of the meetings like this. Because do you have any bias towards this? Like, do you gain anything?
I don't. No, I don't gain anything from it. I'm a curious watcher of the dynamics. I care about the political factionalization.
Right.
That's what my expertise is, you know?
But most people, if you're going to give them that information, and I think that's the answer, you give them all the information and let them make an informed decision. One of the unintended consequences of the era is that nobody trusts the messages they're receiving anymore. So they're going to believe that everybody's got some intention. If we're up here saying, hey, look, maybe the data centers aren't as bad as people think, they're going to be like, oh, North Idaho Experience is just hoping more people buy houses, right? Like, valid. No, I'm just kidding. But truly, they're going to think there's some, not altruistic intention, or that we're somehow getting gamed by the people that really want. And it sucks.
Yeah.
I wish, our legacy media has a huge hand in that, right? Where everybody thinks it's going to be something that's going to be manipulated, or all of a sudden, any information you try to look up on Google, you're not going to be able to find it because they're going to suppress it because it's not in favor of their system. It's wild.
Man, I can't, are we just prolonging the inevitable? Is this entire country just going to just slowly become infected with the mind virus, and we're a dying breed?
I don't know. I
have a legitimate fear about that.
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm not so entrenched in politics. It's values to me.
Right.
And the values just aren't aligning, but I can't see another way, and I'm not going to change my values.
Oh, dude.
My read on at least the current political dynamic recently is that you were in one of two camps, right? You were a trust the science person, right? Or you were questioning the science or the measures, right? So it was actually a very unifying moment, 2020, 21, through probably 23, where there were existing factions, but they kind of unified in the two camps. But now that as a unifying, item, it's kind of gone away. It's like people want to continue the fight. They want to continue the kind of the questioning of other people. They want to focus on the differences versus the unifying factors. So we're seeing that kind of accelerate right now. And it's starting to be in tribal warfare. One of the people I really, really like on Twitter, his name's Naval Ravikant. He's like a kind of like the oracle of the venture capital world. He owns a company called AngelList, and he had a tweet which I really liked, and it was something to the effect of like, history is a continuity of tribal wars with brief intermissions, right? So the nature is to be tribal, and there are brief intermissions when there's unifying elements, and this is one of them. So it's like we're now kind of descending back into a tribal war. And we're seeing that in local politics. So and it's hard to be like, that person doesn't like that person, but that person also likes this other person, but those two people don't like each other. So it's like a landmine field. Like, how do you even understand like who you can talk to? And it just increases this paranoia. So it's like the mind virus is like the paranoia, and we're seeing a lot of that right now. Right?
How does this resolve?
I don't know.
What do you see? Read the future for me. Do you want my crystal ball?
I think people just get burnt out from it. And if you're a normal person that just wants to be productive in society and focus on your family, focus on your church, focus on, just being a positive contributor, you're just going to, and that's why we don't see a lot of really good candidates that are competent want to throw their hat in the ring, because it's kind of like a mudslinging fest. And if you have any self-respect, it's like really hard to throw yourself into politics locally, right? And you have to kind of traverse that. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's just going to be, there's going to be ebbs and flows. It's going to surround big political decisions and elections and stuff like that. But I mean, we've seen this happen in history. I think there's going to be a little bit of, and especially with technology where you can have your own community that's not in the real world, right? Like you have your own technological community and your own groups that is completely disconnected to like the actual physical IRL existence. So I don't know where it's going to end. I mean, there's going to be clashes. People are going to retire. People are going to get burned out. People are going to kind of change factions, every now and then. But I mean, in some ways that's healthy. You want to have like different competing ideas, but I don't know how it's going to end. I don't know if there's going to be some other COVID-like event that is going to be a unifying thing, right? Like we had 9/11, we had
Aliens.
Yeah, aliens. So I'm interested in film, and we just had our film festival. I'll do a shout out to North Idaho Film Festival.
Heck yeah.
We just had that 3-day festival this past weekend, and I was like talking with one of the guys about doing a short film, and the scene is like a boardroom, right, where you have like this guy that represents like the central banker that's like, okay, like what the people are learning, what are we gonna do to kind of keep them stratified and keep them fighting each other. And there's like a guy that's wearing like a doctor's suit, and he's like, well, we tried the thing that worked really well, why don't we just kind of do that again? And then someone else is like a general's like, no, you had your turn, we need another big war, we need to do that to unify the people against a common enemy. And then you had like a guy in like a spandex biker outfit. He's like, well, the Europeans, they really like climate change. So why don't we have a big climate disaster where we can really dial that up? And then there's the guy with like the tie dye and like, the long hair. And he's just like, I think what people really need is an alien event. That is really going to
I'm
like,
the tie-dye guy.
Yeah.
Damn it.
yeah. Where it's like people are going to really give up all their autonomy and all their rights to fight the true common enemy, which is aliens, right? Like think Independence Day when everybody
It doesn't
got together.
get any more common.
Exactly.
Other than like an earth-wide climate event, something like that.
Yeah, it's about it's a species ending event, and then everybody can get behind that.
Right.
And honestly, we saw that as a country. We've seen it time and time again. What was the what did they pass after 9/11? That was like it was the Bush era.
Patriot Act.
Yeah, the Patriot Act, where all of a sudden it's you said it before, where it's like these incremental changes, and we go back to the boiling frog, right? It's like, well, slowly but surely.
Oh yeah, and then the common answer, and I've said this myself in the past, and I've heard people in my family say it recently. Well, I have nothing to hide. It's okay. Let them look at it.
I feel that way too. But I get the implication.
I don't have anything to hide until the goalpost moves, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute. This is how I live my normal life, and now this X is illegal or whatever it is.
Oh yeah, dude, I watched that.
Yeah.
I watched that in the military, and that moving to the goalpost. And I remember standing out. I was aggressively in opposition of it. It was right after. I want to say it was right after the insurrection, which has gotten crazy, by the way.
Oh, boy, that is getting crazier, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So we had huge safety stand down. I'm still in the reserves, and they're going through and talking about all of these things that are different symbols of hate or hate speech or anything like that. And the big one was like people having tattoos of a Confederate flag or something like that, like if they were from the South. I said, so how long before me wearing a blue line flag becomes this symbol of hate? And let's say that somebody has a tattoo from 9 years ago, but all of a sudden you've moved this to decide that in and of itself is a symbol of racism, which you could see that happening in our country.
They're trying.
It
with that specific flag. I know there's certain states for sure.
Well, it reminds me of like like Elon always posts this meme where it's like he's standing still and the left is just going further left, right? And he's like now becoming more right wing while not even moving. That's like literally what it is.
That's exactly right.
That's so accurate. I feel that way a lot, man, because I always believe that I've kind of governed myself based on my values. My life experience are what established my values, not just my parents, my upbringing, my work ethic, things that I've seen, things that I thought were fair and not fair. Like that's what established my values. And here I am just sitting here, and it's like, why am I radical now? Like,
I'm not changing.
Yeah, like why am I called radical now? Like I really feel like I haven't changed that much.
Right.
But I've seen enough of the world to where my values are pretty well entrenched. I'm not going to move those. And I think more of people that are really willing to based on the topic. I think that's where I start to lose my shit. Where I'm like, wait a minute. You can't reassign values based on the topic. Your values should stay pretty consistent. Either you're my body, my choice, or you're not.
Right.
You don't get to flip that based on it's talking about women's rights or somebody injecting something into their body. Which is it?
I know.
That's where I start to lose it. It's like, man, just
the cognitive dissonance is just
yes,
kind of like
just hold
so
the same
rampant.
values, man. Be consistent. I think consistency as an adult is an underrated trait. You know how I feel that way about judges.
There's a definite danger here if you know there's a camp of people like ourselves who feel like we haven't changed at all, and then there's another camp that seems to be the mind virus. I don't know any other way to put it. And they seem to slowly be losing their minds.
Oh.
And I hate to say that. We talk about preaching, really getting along with everybody. We say this all the time. Like Eric and I recently had drinks with a guy that is very left-leaning that reached out to us and wanted to talk. And that was cool. Like good for
conversation,
him.
Yeah.
Great conversation. We sat down on the table and shared drinks together, and we can do that. And we should do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Even though we don't see eye to eye on damn near everything.
And that's it, right? Interpersonal, physical interactions will allow you to have a human connection, right? Yeah. So I have the same experience all the time when, someone that I probably would be fighting a Twitter battle with or something like that, I meet them in person and they're normal people and maybe we have a little bit of a disagreement, but then I see them out again and say hi. And, there's just, that's what the sense of community is. So that's, that happens all the time.
Decency, just being a decent person.
And what do they tell you as a cop? What is it? 85% of communication is body language.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So currently, the way that we communicate with one another, we completely remove that element entirely. Mm-hmm. And then how often do you send a text where you realize the other person took it the wrong way, like totally out of context?
Yeah, no, totally.
Then half the time I'll call them. And then over the phone, you're still able to get a little more because there's voice inflection, which I think is important. But imagine if that was face to face. Hey, man, here's what I meant by that. I didn't mean it like this at all. But then there was no way to fill any gaps because your brain will naturally fill gaps. And if it's already negative in the first place, holy shit, you can take any text message and make it bad.
Yeah. I mean, we get a lot of nasty comments on our YouTube channel and people talk a lot of shit. And I'm
Cheers to those out there. Click like and subscribe.
More views, more views.
But it's like, I guarantee 90+% of them, if they sat down in person, it wouldn't be like that.
No.
It'd be just... I don't get it.
Well, I want to, because, you described this phenomenon. I keep coming with these quotes, but I anchor on these quotes. There's a quote another person said, I forget who it was, but silence is violence, beats don't tread on me every single time, right? Which means that if you have a group of people that view you being silent and not proactively taking their position, then you're being violent towards them.
Oh,
and then, whereas the don't tread me is like, just leave us alone. Like, we are doing our own thing. We don't want to bother you. We don't want you to bother us. But when you have those two different mentalities, it's, the side that wants to basically dominate you will win every single time because you can only run into the hills so far, before you're kind of on their reservation.
Which is a really interesting dynamic because from my viewpoint, the class of people adopting that mentality of silence is violence versus the class and the skill sets of the people that don't tread on me, they don't match up. If it
became a
real conflict, there's a clear winner in that. So I don't understand it.
I don't either. But
is it a function of people need to get punched in the face again?
Oh, I've said that for a long time. I think there'd be a lot of solutions in our.
I'm not advocating violence, but it's like.
Recalibration.
You remove that from the list of possibilities, and I think people, lose touch with reality a little bit.
Well, just think of the nerve that it takes and the faux moral high ground you have to take to look at somebody else and say, not only do you not get to disagree with me at all, but you need to stand up and be vocal.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it's violent. You're a racist. You're a bigot. You're a sexist. You're whatever it is. Without realizing a lot of people on the side that you're talking about, and you've heard me say this before, add another little feather in that cap. First responders and military and active military, there's nobody's whose First Amendment rights are suppressed more by policy.
Right.
You can't post certain things. So you're telling me silence is violence if I don't come out and fly in the face of what established policies, even if it's my profession? It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's just based on emotion.
My friends call me a skipto optimist. It's easy to watch, especially looking at history, like the effectiveness of that type of approach. But I feel like people are, feeling this is so tiresome. I don't want to engage with this anymore. And you got to think about the 90% of people that are just watchers, right? Yeah. I forget.
A lot of it's apathy, bro.
It's apathy, but people. We got to give credit where it's due. I think a lot of the people actually do have very unique positions. Whether it's local politics, state politics, federal politics. But it's very easy to categorize people in big blocks. So I do have hope that their mechanisms to like exert control are like waning, whether it's like, you call someone a racist long enough, it's just like the word becomes meaningless or whatever. But, I do think that there are, we have a solid populace here that can like kind of dig through the mess and understand what's right and what's wrong. So, I do want to give that credit to the population because I am an optimist and we've gone through a lot of different, iterations of this kind of stuff. So, I don't, I think that the power to really subjugate the population for people that don't proactively take their positions is waning, right? And you're seeing with like this Charlie Kirk stuff, people are pushing back. There's a little bit of a pendulum swing. We don't want the pendulum to swing completely the other direction, but there is this balancing act, and I think that a lot of those people, their power is taken away because they are cry bullies. There's these cry bullies that are bullying people while playing victim. Yeah. And that mentality it's just odious at a personal level, right? You can see it. And I think a lot more people are kind of waking up to that tactic. Man,
I like a lot of what you just said, but one of them, if you call people racist long enough, it loses value. And I think, and don't get it twisted. Ask Seth. I'm pretty optimistic. My passion comes out as frustration, but I'm pretty optimistic about this new movement because it's youth and it's grassroots. And I think a lot of them are waking up and realizing what a scam that system is entirely, and they want something different. And they just want the opportunity to live their lives. Where I get frustrated is when words like hero and courage get diluted to the point where they no longer hold value.
Right, yeah. It happens everywhere.
That's
all
a big
words.
one.
And that, to me, seemed like an attack on that protector and warrior class. Like, no, dude, those words are reserved for, like, people that have absolutely put their asses on the line, for the safety and saving line, those things. Not just cops or first responders, but people that have gone above and beyond to make life better for somebody else or protect them. And that was a frustrating part of this evolution. Every time I'd see it and be like, oh my God, you're a hero. Because you got boobs? Like, wait a minute, that doesn't, or you chop that off? I don't understand. Like, that's a personal decision and a painful one, right? I'll give you that. But that drove me crazy.
That pisses me off too, because in the fields we worked in, I can say that I'm for sure we've worked with people that I would put into the camp of heroic.
Oh man, yeah.
Sacrifice to the point of their lives, like things like that. And yeah, you hear that from the other side and you're like, nah, it doesn't equate.
Well, no. I had, when I first moved here, I did with the CDA police, citizens police class. Yeah. And it was like over a month. It was once a week for 3 hours. And one of the things that was like the most illuminating to me was we did these like, drills where like I would have like basically a snap cap gun, and one of the police officers would wear like a suit, and it was like I had to pull over the person, and I went up to their car. It was like a scenario, and I like basically asked for the license, registration, kind of walked back to my fake car, and then they got out of the car and they were like yelling at me, and then it just shows you how quick things can escalate, and you're not going to shoot the gun out of their hand or whatever people say, right? It's, you are in these moments where it's a snap decision, and just me experiencing that personally through this scenario gave me so much more respect on like kind of like the quick decisions that police officers have to make. And when they're in these dangerous situations, they don't know who they're talking to, right? They don't understand what mood they're in, right? So I thought that was like a very illuminating thing that I would encourage most people. I hope that they bring this program back or they do it more regularly, but like a citizens police academy.
That's a great idea.
How long ago did you go through?
It's probably like 3 years ago.
Did you have anybody talk about drugs in yours? I used to teach at that. I'm curious, but I liked it. I like that idea. I love it when they actually get somebody that's like an activist on the other side.
Right.
There was one guy in particular, and he got no love for it. And I want to say he was a BLM activist and was anti, all about police brutality and stuff like that.
Good for him for doing it.
Yeah, and they brought him in. They brought him in and ran him through like 3 or 4 scenarios, and you watched him, and it's not like they gamed the scenarios against him. But he came out and he's like, man, that was different than what I expected. And
Exactly.
tons of respect. But guess what happened to all of his followership?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the hard
misaligned
part.
incentives, right?
Yeah.
He might know what's
Yes.
right, but he needs to maintain the audience, right? Who are just living in their own world, right?
Right. They don't want to, like, what is it like believing so, like, being so emotionally tied to something? And that's the only way to say it. Like, you are emotionally invested to the extent that you will ignore facts in opposition. That's why it's so frustrating with some and people, again, family, friends, whatever. It's like, dude, how are you so tied to this that you're ignoring what's right in front of your face, what's real as the air we breathe?
Is there, it like makes my mind go, because I always want to be fair. Like,
Me too.
are there things on our side that do we do the same thing and we don't realize it? Are we so emotionally invested in logic and facts that we miss the emotion, or like, you know what I mean? Is there an opposite to this?
I'm going to stay that way, so I hope not, because I've really tried hard, because I had an issue with anger once upon a time in my life, right? Yeah, like, I'm not going to be so tied to something emotionally that I ignore it. But I feel like sometimes in arguments on the other side, man, they've provided them hyper emotion as a defense mechanism to any argument against them. That's why you get these, when you explain stuff, it's like tantrum screaming back. And I'm not making this about left and right. I'm really trying not to, but man, when you have such a huge divide in values, it's wild.
Eric and I talk about Stoic philosophy a lot. We both love it. And yeah, ultimately, the only thing we can control is our response to anything.
They try to ignore the externals. I'm working on it.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be a work for the rest of your life, and mine too. I'm not just saying you.
Right.
That's just what it is. I don't know. I still have hope, though. I'm optimistic because conversations like this, whether you're listening to this conversation or engaged in one, I learned so much from these, right? Like,
Right. And we're not being egregious at all,
No.
right? Like, I work for a tech company, and, who knows, this podcast might come out or whatever. Like, I'm not worried about my position on anything I'm saying, and because it's just so much. The zeitgeist has shifted to allow for this type of debate. That
is great.
Which is good. And maybe 5 years ago, this wouldn't have been able to happen, right? And we're not doing anything bad. We're just telling it how it is. So,
Yeah, the downfall of cancel culture, I am loving
exactly
that. That was one of the scariest things that I watched happen. Going, wait a minute, because somebody was speaking their mind and it's different than yours. Unless you're absolutely calling somebody out and encouraging somebody to burn a house with people in it, which happens to law enforcement all the time, but I digress. Unless you're calling for something like that, like with a plan, violence, you have to be able to speak and speak freely. That's a pillar of our society. What makes the United States different.
Yeah, and there's always pressures on it, right? There's always pressure on free speech, and there's always pressure on, right to association, all these different things.
I don't know if we're at the downfall of cancel culture yet.
God, I hope so.
I mean, we just hit the pinnacle of it a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
canceling another life because of it.
Right.
But maybe we're at the cusp, and maybe there's been a strong shift in the past few weeks. I mean, so many more people going to church, so many more people speaking out. People I know on social media that have been quiet that are speaking out in a very reasonable way, but just kind of pointing out the hypocrisy of it all.
Well, and with that, I think it's important we look at both sides. So what is your guys' take on Jimmy Kimmel getting removed from the air?
I admittedly have not looked into it enough, but I'm a firm believer if it's okay, see, I don't know. Was it a private business that made a business decision?
Yes.
Or was there more than that?
No, ABC is.
Yeah, I think ABC and their affiliate network, Sinclair.
That's how the free market works.
Right.
They made a business decision and canceled the show.
Go ahead.
Right.
I don't have a problem with
and there's a difference between, if you're ABC or you're Sinclair, and you don't want that affiliation, right? That's different than like if you're YouTube or Facebook and you're removing individuals on a Section 230 protected platform because you don't like what they're saying about or whatever, right?
Oh, we have been there.
Yeah. So it's like that, like for them to, I hate using this word, be that hypocritical because it's obvious. Like, they're saying, oh, what about free speech? Like they were the originators of the cancel culture. And it wasn't in a, like it could directly impact the bottom line of ABC, whereas Facebook's bottom line is not going to be impacted by having people talk about,
Right.
Going against lockdown measures.
I did like that Vivek came on and talked some smack to YouTube because we've been there. It's been a few years now, but we got an official warning, and if you get 3 warnings, then you get a strike, and then you can actually lose your channel. And it scared the shit out of me. And we got it because we were talking about COVID, and they said we were spreading medical misinformation, and like we were only talking about it from the standpoint of we weren't even getting into it. We were talking about like holistic methods to take care of yourself.
Right.
It was dumb. It was like nothing. And so we've had to be very careful since then. And I see it all the time. Certain shows we'll put out, if we use certain words, it will get suppressed. We did one, we did 2 on human trafficking and crimes against children, and they were both suppressed. And they were very valuable information.
Right.
Nothing negative, only positive, and they got very few views. It freaking pisses me off.
I know.
And there's really no other good platforms. We tried Rumble for a bit, but it's very hard to get traction there. There's X.
Well, it requires people to go download a whole different app, which
Yes.
is difficult. I mean, even look at Tucker Carlson's viewership. That's a classic example. That dude had a massive following, and he had to go to an entire different network. It's a tough deal, and if I weigh in on that, it would just be that I don't think our government should have any involvement in it. Mm-hmm. I think we should go the other way. I think there should be an encouragement of free speech, and if it does impact the business enough to where they remove them, that is entirely up to the business. Because at the end of the day, it's about viewership and the bottom line. So a few of the things, and our president right now is never going to be quiet. Like that's just not in the cards for him. If there's a fight to have, he's gonna have it. But there was a few things coming out after Jimmy Kimmel was removed, and now he's back on the air. And that's the way that process should work, right? Like every once in a while you catch a 3 or 4 day rip at the police department. Maybe it makes you recalibrate and rethink a little bit, right?
Right.
Like that's okay. So he got a 3 or 4 day rip, and then he's back. And because I don't think what he did was unlawful, it might have been in poor taste to the extent that that station or that company thought that it was worth distancing themselves from him. But
especially in the heat of the moment too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
right after. Like, think about your timing, dude.
and it's like, are you contributing to like this like very, very intense moment where who knows what, people are stratified. They don't know what's going to happen. What is the admin going to do? Is there going to be copycat things? It's like, I think this little hiatus for 3 days is not the worst thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
No, just pump the brakes a little bit. But I don't think this side, since we seem to be picking teams, should try to further restrict free speech or suppression of ideas.
And back to the YouTube thing, like I recognize they are a private company and they can do whatever they want, even though we thrive on that.
Right.
I have accepted that I have to play by their rules.
But what's funny with YouTube and Meta and Google, that's almost different. These are they are private companies and they're run as private companies. But as Elon said with Twitter, these have become the town hall. These have become the electorate. And there is some ownership by the community. And if you're talking about just opening it up and making it free speech for all, then it needs to be that way.
Exactly. And I mean, I'm fiscally conservative, right? I don't want government it's highly inefficient. I don't want it taking over any privatization of businesses, right? I do not want that to happen. But there's this mechanism which is more regulatory that I think that is okay, right? I mean, the state legislature in Idaho passed a bill this year where if you have over a certain amount of capitalization in your bank, you're not allowed to remove customers for their political thoughts, right? Like there is a penalty around it. So I think it was like $100 billion. Like it basically relegated it to like 10 banks or something like that,
right.
That these banks aren't allowed to basically remove customers for what they do in their personal lives or what they say. Like that is a regulatory measure. I mean, I think we should get more towards, and I don't know if this is an augmentation of Section 230, which kind of manages the social media platforms, but it should be more aligned with what the constitutional amendment says, right? And if it's a blanket applicable to everybody, they can't use the excuse like I can't get advertisers because there's all this vitriol on my and there's a difference between like power to speak versus power of reach too. Like there's things that you can do, but I think we should get more. And I think platforms like Facebook and even YouTube, when they're saying, oh, we're going to reinstall people that we kicked off during the COVID times, like they're getting there, but it needs to be more of an oomph from the government to make sure.
What would be an example of that? Like a specific words or like openly calling for violence or like what would
I mean, what is the First Amendment, right? Like you're not allowed to just say anything, like the example they always use, you can't scream fire in a movie theater.
Right. You can't make criminal threats against somebody.
Yeah. I would say, and maybe it's not perfectly aligned. I mean, there is a lot of precedent on what is classified as free speech, from court cases and whatever, because the First Amendment is very small. Mm-hmm. But I think we need to get more towards aligning the platforms and making sure that, at least in Idaho, and I don't know if that kind of breaks the commercial clause with the federal government, but like we should put more protections around free speech on platforms. So if you want to do business in Idaho, you can't just kick people off for saying things that you don't like to hear, right? Like there's guidelines, and it's more aligned with the First Amendment. That's what I would want, and it's for everybody. It's not like picking and choosing. And obviously, it's like all the platforms that want to participate here. That's where I feel like we should go. I mean, Idaho, just in general, we have a lot of meat on the bone for taking more of our state sovereignty under our own hands, right? A lot of times we just defer to the federal government. We defer to the federal government for everything. But we have the ability to kind of create our own state with kind of our own that represents the population more here, using more state sovereignty legislation and kind of leaning on the 10th Amendment more, right? A lot of things are were designed for the state to handle versus the federal government. And that's one of the things I think that we can do, both obviously for the state, but federally, like really align the tech platforms with the First Amendment versus like all this other ambiguous layers that people don't even know whether you're allowed to say or not allowed to say. And any given day, you can be getting a strike for something that you thought was normal, right? To say and just have your opinion on. Like I think we should get closer to the First Amendment with the tech platform. I don't know what the blowback with that would be, but that's my position on that.
The Idaho sovereignty thing, is Idaho leading the charge on that state-wise, or how are we doing on that world?
I think that there's a lot of movement here. There's you have Texas and Florida, some of the bigger states where they're leaning more heavily into kind of basically taking a stand to do what's right for those states. Idaho's smaller. We have to collaborate with. We don't have independent economies. We're dependent on other states, including like Washington and other places. But I think there's an opportunity for Idaho to like basically serve itself up as a pilot model for other big states. So, if you're Colgate and you have a new toothpaste product, what they do is they do it in Australia first because the markets are so similar, like America and Australia, but it's a 10th of the size, right? So they like basically test it out. And then once they work out all the kinks and see what the outcomes are, then they roll it out to the bigger market. I feel like Idaho has an opportunity to do that for conservative legislation, maybe a little bit more on the frontier of legislation that gives more state autonomy. We can try some of those things out here, and then if it works, then maybe a bigger state like Texas or Tennessee or Florida can do. I mean, we have the legislative makeup in the state. We have a super majority is what it's called. Above 80% of both the House and the Senate are Republicans, right? Now, obviously, there's different flavors of Republicans, but I think we have an opportunity to really start flexing state sovereignty here. So I know that there's the Idaho Freedom Caucus. They really have a mentality for state sovereignty, and they're kind of crafting their vision and what kind of legislation could like enhance state sovereignty to weather any good or bad times, right? But I do think we have an opportunity here. I mean, I personally would like to see like you look at Switzerland in Europe, right? Like they have all the economic engagements they want. They have their own currency, but they have a lot of sovereignty. They have like basically a militia or like their army. It's everybody has to partake in it, right? Like I like that model, and I think that Idaho can serve as like the equivalent of that in the United States if we have the political will to do so.
I like that.
So when are you getting into politics?
I'm not. I have 3 little kids,
Yeah.
and I have a day job, and I have other things that I'm working on. But I try and help out where I can. But,
Well, you stay plugged in. I'm just curious. I mean, the way that you speak it, you have to be passionate about it. You're obviously passionate about it. I'm just curious if that is a motivation moving forward.
maybe we'll see. Like I said, like I have like a newborn, a 2-year-old. There's just a lot of things going on. I've only been here for 5 years, so I do think that you kind of have to know the lay of the land and see different iterations of the political cycle to really kind of understand the populace and get credibility from it. Not to say that you shouldn't be able to run if you have really good ideas and you have a group behind you if you've been here for so short. But we'll see. I don't know. Not in the next 3 years. Let's put it that way.
Got it.
I keep bumping into people that are of similar age as us.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, and this keeps coming up. I mean, I've said that to you too. Like, and I think it will happen in the next 5-10 years. Hopefully things haven't moved too far where they're not salvageable at that point. But I could see a lot of people stepping up. And I think that's the way it should be.
Right.
There should be a calling. Like it shouldn't be a career goal. It should be you do your time, you do your service, and then you get back to normal life. That's the way it was designed to be.
It's almost like it's called a civil service.
It's crazy.
It's not intended to be like winning the freaking lottery, which is what it seems like in politics right now.
Especially in the federal level.
You get into it to become a millionaire. Like that pisses me off because there's absolutely no way that's not on the backs.
Nancy Pelosi portfolio tracker.
Yes.
God. But that's what I mean. Like that's absolutely on the backs of taxpayers, and that's how you know that you've gone down the rabbit hole of absolute corruption, and that's really frustrating. I think it should go back to being a civil service. I'm a huge proponent of term limits because I think after a while you just stagnate. You stagnate and you lose touch with you. At some point, it's the downfall of every bureaucracy, man. At some point in time, you begin existing for the betterment of the bureaucracy and not for the people that it represents.
Yes.
And there has to be some recalibration with new blood.
I like this thought of the Idaho sovereignty. I know I looked into it a little, like New Hampshire was doing something a few years back. They're probably still
The Free
doing
State
it.
Project.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, does Idaho have something like that? Do we need something like that?
I don't know if we don't have anything that's that organized. I mean, I think we do have. I mean, you look at New Hampshire; they've had 50 generations there, right? From the Mayflower on. Like, we're still kind of fresh. That's the reason why I moved to Idaho in a lot of ways, because it is like the frontier. It's like there is a sense of a pioneering spirit. There's only up to 4 or 5 generations of people, particularly in North Idaho, that have lived here. So there's a lot of opportunity to create things. There's a lot of opportunity to kind of shift it in different directions. But I think that there is just the natural kind of, questioning of government and self autonomy mentality here, that, with a little organization, it could really take off. And I know that the Idaho Freedom Caucus, which is 15 legislators, so it makes up 10% of the legislature, they're really geared towards that, and they're getting a lot of traction. They're getting a lot of support from people that are outside of the Freedom Caucus to pass legislation that advances state sovereignty.
Are legislators up here involved in that?
Yeah, a lot of them. I know Alene Price, Joe Alfieri, they're both in the Idaho Freedom Caucus. A lot of people in the north. It's very north heavy, right?
Yeah.
And that's where, the kind of like the state sovereignty mentality really exists in Idaho, is in North Idaho. It's kind of like the...
I've been kind of joking, half joking, tongue-in-cheek joking about this lately, but I actually do believe it's important, is because we get a lot of pushback, obviously. Our day jobs are selling homes.
Right.
We get pushback, we're bringing too many people to North Idaho. Well, the people are coming anyway. Mm-hmm. So I've been making the argument and that we need to attract more people that share the same values, because Boise is growing faster.
Yeah.
And they seem to be attracting all types. So to preserve our way of life, I feel like we need to double down and get more conservative families up here with good values.
Right. I mean, I'm a part of this group called Kootenai Strong. It's focused on policy. So, you see all this political infighting, and I would call that the 101 level, but like we are really focused on the 400 level classes, right? Where it's like, what are urban renewal districts? What is density? What does regenerative farming look like? What does self-sustainability look like? The principles of Kootenai Strong it's really about community, subsidiarity, and creating policies that like really reflect the community. And we had I forget his name. His name is Sam something. He works for the Idaho Department of Labor, and he's like a statistician. I don't know if
I've heard him speak at a real estate convention. That dude I've been trying to get him on our podcast. He is sharp.
He's really good. And I had the luxury of sitting at a table with like 10 people and him just presenting and asking questions. And he did say something that was great, that the government can only impact like growth by like 5 to 10% through policy, right? So growth is going to happen. That's the market, right? So to build on your point, if it's going to happen, why not gear it towards the people that you would want to come here? Like that's the growth you would want, right? So I think everything you guys are doing is amazing. You always get people who are like, well, I live here and I moved here and I don't want any more people coming. It's, but if it's going to happen, you might as well kind of steer it in the direction of the type of people you want to live amongst, right?
Yes.
And there's only so much the government can do, even at the state level. Even if there was perfect coordination between Coeur d'Alene as a city and the state legislature to really tackle some of the bigger issues around housing policy and things to mitigate growth, or like like taxes on visitors and stuff like that again can only impact it so little, the market. So you guys are doing the right thing. I really appreciate that you guys are actually outwardly looking for people that are going to move here anyway. Yeah, you might as well get the right people.
And I think that the way you do it and the way you attract them is exactly what Idaho's trying to do, and maybe in this case New Hampshire. I can't help but correlate and go back to one of our previous podcasts where we talk about violent crime rates. New Hampshire is actively pushing for their free state and more independent rights for their individuals. They're the only state that beats Idaho in violent crime rate per capita. Idaho's
lower.
Yeah, they're lower. Yeah, they're the only. So they're
That's
50 and Idaho's impressive. Right, and then Idaho's 49. So if you're talking about pushing individual freedoms, each state, and you've heard me say it, so I apologize, but I'm going to say it again. Each state is contributing or competing for contributing members of society, and they're doing that by way of policy and freedoms and limited inhibitions and all of those other things, right? So what sort of people are we attracting to Idaho currently? Those people that want to come here and live their life, right? They're the don't tread on me variety that want good politics, but they're going to pay attention to local elections and local policies.
Yes, and if you are in that class of people and you're thinking about moving here, give us a holler, because
got some good like-minded people. But
you're our people.
Yeah, but I love that, because each state's no different than a business, all competing in a market.
Once you put that idea in my head, which was a few months back, now I can't unsee it, and you're 100% right, dude.
Yeah. So what other states are losing? You know what people don't want? They don't want rampant theft, open-air drug use on their street, people shitting in front of like lucrative businesses. That's what people don't want. You know how I know? Because they're fleeing those states.
Yep.
And they're not freaking moving there unless they have to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So I look at each state's like a business and which ones are winning. And then you hope that's why I'm a firm believer in these little micro adjustments where you can, you're a part of a Kootenai group right now, but these small communities, they're going to grow. If it works, other counties are going to look at it and say, I kind of like that. And then it grows in the state. And then other states are going to look at Idaho and go, man, like if I was Montana, I'd be looking at Idaho going, why is our crime rate so high compared to theirs?
Yes.
No.
Why is it that Idaho is growing faster than we are? And Montana's still growing really fast. Yellowstone effect, I think. But still, but look at the crime rate there, right?
This is how you fight the mind virus.
Yes.
You start your own virus that's a fucking good virus.
That's right. You take the jab of sensibility, right? Of logic and reason.
Yes.
Trust the science.
Yes.
That's how we get there. This is why this episode is going to get banned right there.
Kootenai Strong. Okay, I wrote a note down here. Is that an organization that anyone can get involved in?
Yeah, I think there's a website. I'm just a member.
Okay.
I think
I will link I'll find the website and link it in the show notes.
Yeah, and it just talks about what the group's about. There's a lot of representatives that show up. We have a monthly public meeting. This last one we had the Coeur d'Alene Library Network director just kind of talk about what is it like being a library director? What are the things that you can control? How do you interface with both the elected board and the staff, where there might be some differences in political philosophy between the library staff and the board members? So it's like you just kind of like learn about things. But there's a lot of members of like city councilors and commissioners and the other people that are in elected positions that show up. But it's people that are truly focused on the policy, right? There's, we get people from all across the spectrum. And we had Kiki Miller talk about her housing policy. We had this other person talk about, the prairie and water constraints and those types of things. So it really is designed for people that actually care about the policy and then looking at best practices across the country to see what would fit us here from a policy prescription versus just it's not political. So it takes a certain type of person to want to focus their time on that. But that's where I think a lot of the real work is done.
That sounds fantastic. We have a lot of people that reach out that, are new here or maybe not, but want to get involved.
Yeah. And
that's definitely a common thread of our clients that move up here is we hear it all the time. Like, hey, I want to come up and I want to contribute. And that sounds like a great way to do it.
Yeah. We're so blessed to have it. Right?
Yeah.
And I'll give a shout out to the director, Daniel Finley. He's doing great work, keeping this thing relevant and I think it has a lot of potential to grow. So
Daniel Finley sounds like a guy we need to get on the podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, but I'm
a guy.
I'm a fan of what you're already saying because it's coming from a place of very little ego, right? Hey, if there's another state, we have people moving here from a ton of different states. A lot out of Texas, surprisingly, here lately, but from all sorts, from a lot of other ones. There's some really good things that have been done in cities in California and counties in California. It's just a larger group. So if they come here and they're like, hey, we have this sustainability thing. Here's the way we address this because we really had a water shortage problem. Here's what we did in order to combat that so we didn't have this major issue later. Those are all things like, as an Idahoan here that's pretty involved in the community now, I'd look at that and be like, hell yeah, bring your ball. Like, what do you got?
Right.
We're not going to turn them away because they're from California.
Exactly. That's
good ideas. Take those good ideas because surely someone in another state has dealt with and maybe solved the housing crisis that we're going through.
Right.
Right. Because we're not the only resort city in the U.S. And maybe they would have some good ideas because that's a freaking beast. We talk about it a lot. I don't have a good solution.
And I know it always comes back to copping, bro, but we had a police chief come up from a different state that was really close to the border that learned a whole lot down there. That was like, I've got an idea for policing philosophy out here that I think will be very effective.
And it has been.
We're down 70% Part 1 crimes, dude. Like that, pretty freaking effective in the face of a big population increase. So I like the idea of people bringing ideas. And I'm always going to be of the mind, if I'm sitting across the table, I want to hear it. Like, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Usually it's a lot less expensive if I don't have to reinvent the wheel and go through all that. So I love that there's groups out there.
I feel like we might live in the coolest place in the world.
We do. We're so blessed to be here.
I really do. I mean, for a million different reasons. All the things we're talking about right now, the natural beauty, the resources, the
business,
the
entrepreneurs.
It's unreal.
The people that are out there like literally changing industries. Right? It's awesome. And you'd never know that they were in North Idaho. And it's almost weird. So you talk about the free state policies in New Hampshire, and I think Idaho's right there. They just haven't called it that yet. But it's almost like that opens up your mind and frees you to go think about changing an industry or changing the world, right? You don't have to worry as much about whose hands are in your pockets or the safety of your kids going to and from school. It's always going to be a thought, right? But you can trust your community here. That's a lot different.
Perfect example is Josh over at G9 Ammo.
Yeah.
When we had him on the podcast a while back, and he had mentioned that there were multiple people trying to buy him out. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay local.
We got another buddy we can't talk about yet, but he's the same way. He's like, I'm waiting for the right one. I get to wait for the right one because he loves where he lives. He loves where his family is.
That's people putting values and community over money.
Yes.
Those are the people we want.
I'm already at that stage of life, man. I've said it before. I'm values over blood right now. Like truly, I'd rather, honestly, like my family's the company that I choose. The family's, I don't know, it's different just because it's gotten so nuts.
Yeah.
Back and forth. That's what, it doesn't mean I won't break bread at Thanksgiving. It's just whatever. Right? Like we can just talk about the weather or kids or something non-consequential. When we talk about changing the world, like these conversations, I'll save that for the other family.
No, I mean, so I'm one of the people that moved up here in 21. I bought land in 2020 and then lived in San Francisco for another year and then actually moved my family up here. And I'm just, what Coeur d'Alene grew like 20, 30% or something like that. Like, how many different situations are there in the country or around the world where there's been that much of an influx of people that are largely like-minded? I'm curious to see what happens when the dust settles, right? And people make their connections. They start thinking about what's next instead of like being completely linked to San Francisco or wherever other places, a remote worker, like what is the transition plan to actually building something here and untethering yourself? I mean, I think that there's going to be a lot of innovation and a boom of like interesting things that come out. I mean, like we're talking about like we have a lot of like gun manufacturers here, and we have a lot of the defense industry, like that'd be awesome if we had like a drone company that was built here, right?
Don't we have one in Post Falls? I have not.
I
made
think
the connection yet. I know there's one out there.
Oh, yeah. I think there are a couple, but like just really making North Idaho welcome companies to invest R&D in drone manufacturing here or some kind of defense manufacturing. I feel like we have the perfect population for it. So and that's an industry, right? Like that will create high-paying jobs. That will bring money into our economy, right? We don't have to be super dependent on like the tourism industry. Again, this have-not problem where people can afford houses. So there's like a macro approach to this housing issue, and then there's like only so much you can do from like onesie twosie policies to like help make things easier and relieve housing costs. But I feel like we have an opportunity here to see what it looks like when the dust settles for people that have moved here and brought their ideas and kind of exposure to other bigger places. Yeah. But while not obviously changing the ethos of this place, that's the balance.
What, in your opinion, what do you think is like the first actionable step someone can take that moves here? Like, what's the best way to get involved?
I think just go to the den. Go to the Innovation Collective. Just hang out there.
You're right.
Yeah.
The people you will meet down there at this little critter crawling around and everything. Yeah. The people you will meet at the den at Coeur d'Alene Coffee down there, it's crazy.
Yeah, people are doing interesting things. You just
really.
I don't have any of my actual coworkers there, but I call them my coworkers, and I just like talk to them, see what they're up to. It's very high functioning people with big ideas, and kudos to them for like creating that environment. But that's where a lot of the interesting stuff, like Doc works out of the den.
That's we had coffee with him there last week. Well, I had coffee with you there last week too. But there's something about going into the basement at the den and then opening the freaking magic bookcase and going into this like big old room that is beautiful and masculine and kind of moody and
cigar room
hidden.
In the back.
Yes, it's so freaking cool.
Yeah, but it's like a speakeasy down there, and I swear to God, there's something that like ties us back to the years leading up to 1776, where a bunch of guys got into a room and realized that what they were doing had consequences, drank beers together, and laid down the framework of the greatest country that our world has ever seen. Like, there's something about it where you get around like-minded individuals, and even on a day where you're not motivated, you get around people like that, you walk in, you're like, I'm gonna go up my game a little bit, dude. There's no time to be a bitch. Like, time to rally. You know what I mean? Rally and go change something for the better.
So how do we take? These conversations are really good, but I'm a person like I can talk all day long, but then it's like, how do we take actionable steps? What do you do?
I think the first thing is just become aware of the political dynamic in your local area. What are the issues? What do people get fired up about? How can I participate in, even if you're not running as a person, like how do you help out? I mean, what I love doing, I'm kind of like weird like that. I love going to Costco. I love going to the North Idaho Fair, and I just love talking to random people. I helped out with a campaign in 23, and I got to knock like 2,000 doors, and I just talked to people, and I wanted to figure out what made them tick. What are the different factions? I have a pretty good sound kind of understanding of all the different kind of ideas and factional alignments, and it's just and then I kind of absorb that, and I understand what actually is the community, so that when I talk in Kootenai Strong or engage with people, I can kind of help reflect what that community looks like.
You're fascinating, dude, because not a lot of people would. That's not your business. You don't make money on this. You don't pay the bills with this. You're just doing it because you have a passion for it.
That's exciting. I think it's exciting. That's cool.
Yeah, but you also got your eye on the long-term prize because this directly affects you.
Right?
I live in a community that I want to. Yes, I want a community that my kids can live in and thrive in.
Yes,
right? They don't
grow. Yeah,
exactly. So I do think like if you can go to CDA Coffee Company once a month, just kind of see what's going on. Maybe like people are super friendly and open to chatting. Like just kind of see what's going on there, what projects people are working on, right?
And it seems that way, especially I think a lot of people, when they come and visit, they're like, they're so shy. Even over the phone. I'll get a brand new phone call. Hey, man, what's up, dude? I saw your area code. Where are you from? I'm I'm in that place. I'm in Southern California. It's like, bro, you don't have to be ashamed of that. Most of the people here came from somewhere else. And the Innovation Den seems like a place where, oh, hey, man, where are you from? Oh, I'm from San Francisco. Dude, it's all good. Like, what do you do down there?
For 10 years.
Right. Like, hey, what's up, dude? What's bringing you to North Idaho? You know, here's what's it like in this community. Here's the big difference. Like, you're going to run into people that are like-minded because there's not that big, long, generational tie-in here. Most people here are moving from a place, they're running to something, not from something. Maybe a little bit of both. But either way, they're coming here with some ideas in their mind to keep this place, and to make it better. So that's been my experience.
So if you're out there, and because I've had a few people reach out to me like, hey, I don't know how to get connected up here. There you go. Go down there, or one of the dozens of other locally owned coffee shops. Don't go to Starbucks. And just strike up a conversation with somebody, because it might seem scary in your mind, but I guarantee that person will love to talk to you. And just see where it goes. Like, pull that thread until you can't pull it anymore, you don't want to, and then find another thread and just keep pulling them. And that's right. That's how I made connections up here, hanging out in coffee shops.
And that's where I landed when I came here in 21. I went there and worked out of there, and then started becoming friends with people and learning about what they were doing. And they had friends. They moved here recently. They were looking, and that's the beauty. It's like going to college again. I feel like here, because you're not going to a stagnant place where everybody's known each other forever, right? Like, you're going to a place where people are always looking for new connections, because they want to build something and they want to see what kind of talent is out there. So it's like going to college for the first time, meeting the other freshmen that like just kind of want to meet people and hang out and like, you know, build bonds with. So that's the vibe I got when I landed there, and you know, in just short order, I like kind of really got plugged in a lot of different ways. So, and you can learn about this place.
I've stepped my game up recently. Now I meet people in the sauna.
Nice.
Dude, bro, you were doing that last year.
It really breaks down barriers.
Hey, dude.
Fully clothed. I'm not
Do you
that
start
guy.
like this?
I'm not that guy. Yeah.
I am Seth.
Just like, oh, I'm sorry. Did I sweat on
What
you?
makes you tick?
Just throw a little freaking bald head sweat.
We joke about it a lot, but I have the best conversations in the sauna. You're undistracted. You can't bring a phone in there anyway because it'll overheat. You're undistracted.
There is something to that, man. Meeting people's a lot. Leave your damn phone in your pocket.
Yeah.
Right? Leave your phone in your pocket. Have face-to-face, like eye-to-eye conversations with other humans. And it's still like that here.
It is still like that here. People say hi to you on the street.
Well, and I think, man, it's just the defense mechanisms are down. You're not as encumbered. Even when you find somebody that thinks differently, you're not as tied to that in the face of, like, instead of having like a decent conversation with somebody else. It just feels like some of those defenses are down. Yeah. You can just have a normal conversation here. I think people are more comfortable. It's almost like, this is going to sound like a bad relation, but I think about it like a dog, right? Like dogs, no, truly, dogs they like to know their place in the world. They like to be disciplined, comfortable, have shelter, have food, all of those things, and then have some structure.
Yes.
It almost seems like there's a structure here, and it's a supportive structure, so you can be more comfortable to be normal, right? Be social.
Yeah.
The barriers aren't up.
Well, this place sounds like paradise.
Yeah, it does a little bit.
Yeah, don't fuck it up.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Cheers.
All right, brother. We're pushing, we're over an hour now. So, but thank you, man. That was actually a really fun conversation.
Yeah,
we didn't
no idea where it was going to go.
No,
you know?
We never do. We didn't even get into some of the stuff we wanted to. Another time.
Yeah. We'll do it again.
It's more serious.
We'll do it again. So, thank you, Cal. I appreciate everything you're doing for this community, man.
Yeah, it's a pleasure being on here and meeting you guys. I feel like we're buds now.
Hang out, link up for sure.
Hell yeah. All right, yeah, we'll do it again sometime. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, later,
thank you guys.
Later.